Welcome everyone to our live Bizapalooza chat. We are here on Monday, and I just want to welcome all of you. I am your host, Ivana Taylor, and today we are talking about the psychology of color. So when you say that you're angry, we say that you see red. And when you are sad, we say that you see what? Blue. You're feeling blue. And when you're jealous, we say that you're green with envy. So clearly colors have some kind of an impact on our emotions. But is it possible to influence people's feelings about your business by simply choosing one color over another? So as long as we're going that far, is it possible to influence people's actions based on the colors that you incorporate in your business? Well, we're answering all of those questions and then some here on Bizapalooza Chat. But before I introduce you to our guest today, I want to announce that you probably see that Bizapalooza has a major brand makeover sponsored by 99 Designs. So we're launching our new look today, and we're talking a little bit about why Bizapalooza needed a redesign, the details of a redesign. You'll find all of that on DIYmarketers.com today. With that, I also want to thank my friends and your friends over at 99 Designs for their consistent and ongoing support of the cash-strapped small business owner and their commitment to making it possible for every small business owner, no matter how small your budget, to have a beautiful brand that includes everything from logos to letterhead, web design, posters, and much, much more. So please take a moment to head over to 99designs.com, check out all the amazing stuff. We're going to have special links for you just for this show. And without any further waiting, I want to welcome you, our guest, Kelly Moore from 99 Designs, who wrote the amazing article, The Business of Color, where she details exactly how powerful your color choices are. So head over to 99designs.com and welcome Kelly.
Hi, thanks for having me, Ivana. I'm super excited to be here to talk about color today.
I know. So let's talk a little bit about your experience with color. I dare say all the folks who are watching can see your gorgeous purple hair. And with yesterday's Super Bowl being over in Minneapolis, home of the Purple Prince himself, that was the first thing I thought of today.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit I actually didn't watch the Super Bowl yesterday, so I'll, and I guess I would have to go green if I really wanted to be, apropos and on point right now with the Eagles win. But yeah, I don't know. I love color. I was always an artist as a kid, and then was super excited when we sort of dove into this topic as a business. Obviously, color is super important in design. We did a bunch of research, not just sort of the standard like, oh, red means love because of Valentine's Day, but we actually dug into some academic research and some scientific research around how color impacts us. And we have some super interesting results to share about it. So.
Well, I am thrilled to bits. And oh my goodness, folks are dropping into the chat, which is really cool. Everyone's waving hello, yay, yay. But, I'm not the only one who's had a rebrand and a redesign. Why don't you talk a little bit about the 99 Designs brand story? Because, I feel like I've known about 99 Designs for a really long time, something like 2008, 2009. So the old logo, which actually I can share with folks. Couldn't I share screens? Just so you guys could see, you're going to see who can share. I can share. I want to share. How do I do that? Share screen. Let me share my screen. There we go. You guys are going to see my, my little chart. You can see the old 99 Designs logo and the new 99 Designs logo. Talk a little bit about that, Kelly.
Yeah, so this was actually, so you were almost exactly right in your dates. We actually started on Valentine's Day in 2008 is the official start of 99 Designs. So we'll be celebrating our 10th birthday next month, which will be pretty exciting. And basically 99 Designs started with a bunch by designers, for designers on a website called SitePoint. And they got together and they started hosting these sort of friendly competitions to see like who could do this particular design project. Thought that sounded like a great idea. So the company kind of grew out of there. And ever since then, we sort of have pioneered the concept of design contests where designers from all over the world basically read through your design brief and they say, like, they're like, I have an awesome idea for this. They sketch up something, give it to you. If you like it, you kind of work with them a little bit until you narrow down to a group of finalists and ultimately a winner to get your logo or whatever other kind of design you need. So in 2015, we actually decided we were also growing as a company. So kind of decided to rebrand. So if you kind of look at our two logos, we have that bright, bold orange. It's kind of fun. It's a little bit sketchy, sketchy in the drawing sense, not in the dangerous sense. And I think that, that really was where we were coming from. We were fun. We were a little bit like scrappy as a company. And so that was a great old logo for us. And then in 2015, as we realized that we were growing and maturing, we wanted to also grow and mature our logo. So I think the example that you have up is in the sort of dark gray color. We have actually a dynamic color palette for our logo, so we can use that logo in any colors. The kind of base one that we use on most stuff, if we don't have another color we're using, is still an orange. It's a little bit more of a muted orange, a little bit more modern. It takes us into the modern age, but it still retains that like orange, as we'll talk about later, has this kind of youthful, fun, energetic vibe to it. So we wanted to keep that around, but we also wanted to be flexible. The typeface is really modern and clean. We wanted to appear a little bit more grown up, but there's still some little quirky details in there. For example, the G right there is like, you can see the bottom and the top don't align. It's a G in like a slightly different font than the rest of it. So it's a little bit fun, a little bit off. The 9s being pushed together, there's some little details there that kind of keep that quirky, fun feeling that we had, but just matured it a little bit as our company matured.
Well, I just think it's really interesting, and I'm really glad that you started talking about not just about the colors, but about how the logo sort of has to encompass the sort of personality of the brand. Now, here's something I didn't plan on asking, but it's a question that popped up for me, which is, did you guys run a contest for your own logo design?
We did, and I'm happy to share the link to it or to our article about it. Yeah, we could not have done it if we did not do a logo contest. I feel like we thought that would have been about the most hypocritical thing we could do. So we ran a contest. We set a custom prize amount. We wanted to pay our logo designer really well. But yeah, and we opened it, you and I, before this chat started, we're talking about the different levels that we had. So we only opened it to our platinum designers, which are really top level hand vetted designers. And we got some amazing results out of it, and from all sorts of different directions, all sorts of styles. So yeah, we did.
And I think it's interesting that you're talking about this alternating, changing color palette. And this idea of being able to, use these different colors at different times. Is that an ongoing trend right now?
Yeah, it's a trend we're actually you're seeing in a lot of places. I think off the top of my head, like the Uber, if you look at Uber did a rebrand a couple of year or two ago, and they're doing it like in different cities. There's like different color schemes that go along with it. You'll see, I think, Pandora, maybe Airbnb, a lot of people are using kind of flexible, different colors that either represent different things, or they're just kind of building it into, have that flexibility. For us, it was all about like, we wanted to showcase how awesome our designers were and really put design first. So if we wanted to showcase this beautiful, awesome, creative design, we wanted our logo to be able to augment that as opposed to stand out from that. So we can take a color from the design and bring that into our logo. Depending on what we're writing or what we're doing, we can use different colors to create different meanings and different scenarios.
So I'm glad you brought this thing up about the rebrand. Let's talk a little bit about that. There's an article up on DIY Marketers where I started talking about, like, for me, it became really, really painful to not rebrand. There was nothing wrong with the original brand. It just had a different intent, a different purpose that was no longer true. What was it, if you recall, that triggered, when did you guys do this new logo? What triggered that rebrand for you guys?
This was in 2015. Well, we unveiled it in 2015. Or actually, I think early 2016 is when we unveiled it, but most of it, we worked on it in most of 2015. And I actually, that was kind of right when I came into the company, but so I was not here for the original decision. But basically, what I have been told from all of the people that I was working with as we were developing it was like, we just realized that it wasn't really, we had developed this brand. It was great at the time, but we felt like we were trying to do something else. We were starting to have all sorts of different customers come in. It wasn't just a small business anymore. We have agencies that are coming in. We're attracting higher quality designers, a lot of professional designers. We wanted to we felt like it just wasn't representative of the whole of our company. Like, it was sort of like a small part of it. And so we wanted to develop something that was a little bit more inclusive.
Excellent. So you've talked a lot about your growth, and I got to say, it has been astounding. And I am embarrassed to say, as someone who has been with 99 Designs probably since the very beginning, I've run a couple logos through you guys. And then the other thing I saw is that you just expanded and expanded. I mean, it wasn't just logos anymore. It's websites, it's marketing materials. I mean, packaging even, which I thought was awesome, right? So talk a little bit about how you guys came through that revolution, and maybe how you brought on, because where I'm going to go with this is how you got to the one-on-one projects, because doing a logo is maybe easy to do as a contest, but once you start adding more complexity to the project, there's got to be something else. So maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so we started out with contests, and that was sort of our basic differentiator from everybody else on the planet in terms of how we were doing design. And like you said, it worked really well for getting a logo. And so as the business has grown, we've continually been adding more and more categories into it and supporting them better. You mentioned packaging design. Like, we now have a contests that are very uniquely for that. Like, we'll ask you all the questions if you're getting a packaging design. We'll make sure we have the right die line for you. We'll make sure that we have whether you're working with a label, like we have a lot of, so we'll do that. We have book covers where some of these things. And then there's other areas, as you mentioned, web design, where we offer web design contests, and some people find them really helpful, but there's also some trickiness to them. You know, what are you getting in a web design? Are you getting one template? Are you getting every single page laid out? And where it starts to get complicated. And we've actually offered what we call one-to-one projects for a long time now. So there's always been the ability to work with your designers. What we realized is that a lot of people do it after they host a contest, where they have a logo contest, and then they're like, oh, now I need business cards, or now I need my website. And so I've met this awesome designer, and now I'm going to work with them. And we wanted to just start elevating that and give that, put that out in the world a little bit, so people know that they can do that right at the front. Because as you mentioned, website design, or whether you're getting a custom PowerPoint developed, there are some things that are just a little bit easier to start with work one-on-one with a person. So that's really one of the things we're working on as at our company this year, is to figure out how we can let all of you lovely people out there know more about this service. And then we're going to help work on our end to make it easier to find that right designer that has the exact style that you are looking for, make the tools easier to use for collaboration. I think that's one of the unique things that sets us apart from some other freelancer sites, is everything is really designed around design. There's the way that you can comment on images and annotate them is all really set up around design, as opposed to just like a standard messaging platform that you might get back and forth on a Fiverr and Upwork. And we're going to build all of that into our projects as we go forward.
Awesome. So I'm going to kind of turn the conversation back to you a little bit, which is when I was asking for an expert to talk to today, and we came to this idea of talking about color, because, we talk about, content. We talk about all different kinds of things for small business, but I think color is really, really interesting. And they actually said that you were the color expert, and you have a really interesting background. So talk a little bit about your background and talk a little bit about how you became a color expert.
Yeah, so I have a bit of an eclectic background. Oh gosh, I'm trying to even think where the best place to start is. I actually have I've always been one of those creative people. I actually have an undergraduate degree in filmmaking and a graduate degree in writing. So I think that and then I've worked all sorts of odd jobs. I worked as a web designer for many years. So I have that kind of design background side of it. I've always, as we were mentioning with the purple hair, I've always just loved color. It's been something that through art and through film, color is obviously very important in film as well. I had worked doing a lot of editing and color correction when I was in my early 20s to kind of, you want to give a film a certain look. So through filmmaking, through web design, it's always been something that I was very interested in. And, I did like my basic elementary school color theory where red and blue make purple and that kind of stuff. And then when I started at 99 Designs, there was an option to write this Business of Color project. And as a writer, I just really and a researcher, I really was able to dive into it. And as I mentioned, started reading some of the actual academic stuff behind it, and then taking that and applying it to business and applying it to how we actually use those colors in design.
And I think that's fascinating. And one of the things, when I saw in your bio that you had a background in filmmaking, I was thinking to myself, where was this woman 2 years ago when I was trying to learn all about that and putting some of this video stuff together. But I wanted to talk a little bit about color choice in branding as to supporting your story, because when you started talking about 99 Designs and their color choices and some of the different color choices that companies make, I noticed that you mentioned a lot of specific things, the values that the company has, the personality that the company has, and then how that's expressed in how that's expressed inside the colors. So I was wondering, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So okay, there's multiple parts to this question. I'm trying to figure out the best way to address it. So let me start with kind of you talked about the process of choosing your brand colors. So generally, and as you kind of heard me talking about it, you want to think about what your company represents. And we like to call that your brand personality. Same as every individual has a personality. Every brand has a personality. And if you think about it like people, when we're in high school, we sort of learn how to present ourselves. If you are going to wear a Letterman's jacket and you're going to if you're carrying around sports equipment, if you know what's really important to you, you make sure you go to the gym every day. Maybe that's you branding yourself as a jock or as an athletic person. Whereas if you maybe wear square frame glasses and like to dress in all black and go to theater and you do all these actions and you present yourself, and that's you developing your personal personality to show who you are. And the same thing with a brand. You want to think about what you're trying to put out in the world. For example, if you are a bank, Bank of America, Chase Bank, the most important thing is that people trust you. They are giving you a lot of money to hold on to it. So you want to make sure that you are trustworthy. If you're somebody like us, a startup, you have a little bit more leeway to be we want to be a little bit quirky. We want to stand out. We want to have this kind of fun personality. So kind of figure out, how do you want the rest of the world to view you? And once you sort of have that figured out, then from there you can kind of figure out your colors. And usually how we tell people to do that is to kind of sit down and really think about your mission and vision. What is your purpose? And then start coming up with adjectives. One of the kind of fun branding exercises that people always do is, if your brand were a car, what kind of car would you be? If your brand were an animal, what kind of animal would it be? And that really starts you thinking in different ways about your company, and allows you to kind of if you answer that your car is a Volkswagen Beetle versus your car is a Rolls Royce, like we all have all of these associations about what those two different things mean. And I think if I said that to anybody, we might have slightly different ideas about that, but like people would be like, oh yeah, I totally get the difference there. So do some of those exercises, start to understand who you are. And then also think about your customers, because there's who you are, but there's also the people who are buying your stuff. And you, like, oftentimes people think like, oh, my stuff isn't applicable to, or my service is applicable to everybody. But it's actually, if you kind of narrow in on a niche, you're going to be much more successful. And sometimes that niche might not be who you think it is. I mean, you might be a motorcycle riding, like hardcore, like punk rock listening to person. But if you're making like wall decals for babies, you know, bedrooms, then maybe your audience is, you know, new moms who might not want that hard, edgy side, or maybe they are. Maybe you're appealing to punk rock moms, which is a totally viable segment of the market. Just kind of thinking about who are those people and what do they want and how are they going to interpret it. You know, because some people see like a person in their all black with their punk rock t-shirt and they're like, awesome, this person's great and friendly. And some people will see that and might have a different interpretation of that human. So
I think that's such a great point. I want to reference a tweet that just came out that I think is, I just want you to comment on this. So Cheryl T. Martin says, my primary color is red, which goes against all things, are you ready? Mm-hmm. Finance. It's my favorite color, and I think it tells my clients that I'm full energy and not a typical accountant. Now, going off of what you just said, and I had responded to her and was like, well, what do your customers think about that? And she says, my customers are creatives.
There you go. I think that's a perfect example. Like, we can come up with a list and guidelines and say, here's what each color means. But sometimes like it's really helpful to go the opposite direction, as long as you're doing so cognizantly and you are aware of why you are doing that. And I think that red is one of those colors, and that was the next part of my answer, was to kind of start getting into some of this. Red is one of those colors that's super high energy, it's bold, it catches attention. And so, you know, in accounting in particular, there's an extremely high level of like blue logos. Like every logo is blue, and that's because blue is like seen as very dependable. So, and you know, accountants, you want them to be trustworthy, but blue, like it can also sort of come off as boring if you don't do it the right way and everybody out there. So red is a really great way to differentiate yourself, especially if you are going after a very particular market, like you're going after creatives. So yeah, there's no hard and fast rules around this. It's just about making smart choices.
Exactly. So let's get right down into it, because it just so happens that the post just went out with a beautiful color table with all the different colors. Now, I have to tell you, Kelly, I see so many Main Street businesses do some exceedingly ugly things. Not only do their names not match what they do, but their logos and websites and color choices are just an absolute mess, right? So maybe if we can give those folks a little bit of a primer, you know, assuming your company name's not going to change, what are some things you can do? What colors should you be picking? Talk a little bit about some of those color meanings.
Yeah, so let me take a step back and talk about where color meanings sort of come from at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So there's actually a couple of different ways that we develop color meanings. There are a couple very few select colors that actually have an evolutionary, like we have been evolutionarily designed to react to. And the two colors that have been shown to kind of have that are red and brown. And red is, first of all, is that kind of like, I guess the best way to say it is it's heightened emotion. And if you think about it, you know, like whether you are feeling very lustful or angry, like our faces get red, it's that physical like reaction to that. It's also a sign in nature, oftentimes, of kind of stop or slow down, like don't eat this red butterfly because it might, you know, be dangerous. Or so it's kind of, red is like, basically we have an emotional like reaction of like excitement kind of around that. And that excitement can be transitions to positive or negative emotions. It could be love and lust and ooh, or it could be like anger and like frustration. So it's that really kind of heightened emotion is what red has. And that sort of trickles down to red associated colors. So orange obviously has a lot of red in it and takes a lot from that as well. And then the other one is brown. which is one of the least used logo colors, or one of the least used colors. And it makes sense because brown is actually evolutionarily is when something is decaying and rotting, it turns brown. And so when you're talking about brown food, like that is really disgusting to most people. So like brown is sort of taken on this like a little bit of a step back color. That's not to say you can't use brown, but again, think about it intelligently because it's going to have certain associations that go with it. So we have this evolutionary colors for certain things. And then the other two ways that you can get color associations are cultural and are also our personal preferences. So how we here in the US with our Western centric vision see colors is going to be very different than, say, the meaning of colors in different countries. As a way of an example, red is in China, you know, brides will wear red on their wedding day, whereas they wear white here. However, in the Middle East, red is very much a sign of danger or evil. And in South Africa, it's actually the color of mourning. So that's what you would wear to funerals. So if you're going to have a red logo, you might have an international business, you might want to be paying a lot more attention to what the color meanings are in different areas, because there is nothing that is universal. And so there's like these larger cultural meanings, but then there's like small cultural meanings too, or micro cultures. For example, if you were in Philadelphia, you might have a really positive association with green right now, whereas if you are in New England, you may hate anything green at the moment. So we have all these like personal and cultural things that kind of come out of that. So that being said, kind of running down some of the overall meanings, and this is really particular to business. And this was kind of as we were, there is a study done, marketing and advertising study where they took packages essentially, or to put a logo on a package in a certain color and asked people kind of like what their impression of this business was. And then there were certain businesses or certain colors that had a really strong association with certain things and others that didn't. So reds and oranges really, like, as we said, it's exciting. Those ones are seen as very youthful, as modern, and loud a little, and like they grab attention. So those are kind of things that go along with reds and oranges. And I would point out that red is used a lot more. So if you are looking for something that has that kind of excitement to it, consider if orange is a possibility for you, because it's just not used nearly as much as red is. Yellow is the actual, I mean, everybody always associates it with being sunshine and friendly, and it very much is. It's very approachable. But how that approachability sometimes translates is it's actually affordable when you're talking about marketing or branding. So you'll often, and you start to see it. You see the golden arches at McDonald's. You see the blue and yellow of the IKEA logo. So it's kind of this yellow being affordable. So if you are trying to set up a luxury business, you know, and you really like yellow, you might want to be thinking exactly how you're going to use it. Maybe going a slightly more gold will help you with that. Green is actually very interesting because according to the study, the research, green is one of the, is the only color that really doesn't have any strong market associations. So green is really up for grabs by any organization but it's not going to have the same sort of like reaction that red would. We just don't have that many associations. It's a very neutral color. That being said, we were talking about those cultural associations, whether you're in Philadelphia or you are an environmental business, we have like these mental associations of green means environment and that sort of thing. So that can be useful, but it also doesn't mean that you have to use green if you are an environmental business, or you can't use it if you are in another type. Blue is sort of is dependable. Blue is, it symbols trustworthiness, maturity. If you want to be taken seriously, blue is a really great color. Blue is also the most used color. It appears in over half of the logos out there. So that is something, and that's across all different industries. So if you want to use blue, just make sure that you are doing something else to make you stand out, because blue is going to, there are going to be a lot of other people who have blue. And as I mentioned, there are different ways to do blue. If you look at the Twitter logo is blue, but it's more of this kind of like a lighter blue. So it has that little bit more fun and friendliness to it, a little bit more youthfulness, whereas usually it's mature. Making it just a lighter shade, that pastel brings it a whole different dimension. Purple is sort of that old, the only market association is actually with femininity. So it's very lightly associated with feminine things versus masculine. And then there's all the old cultural associations of purple being very much for royalty and luxurious. So luxurious and female are kind of, or women are sort of what comes out of purple. Pink, again, has the association with women in our culture, which, as a random side note, didn't exist until the 1930s, and it was totally a marketing ploy by one of the big department stores basically decided they could sell more children's clothing if they gendered it. And so like you couldn't just save your hand-me-downs from one to the other. Previously, like all kids had worn white because white was super easy to bleach and to clean. And then they're like, nope, now there's pink for girls and blue for boys, and your boy can't wear your girl's clothes and vice versa. So that's just like a super interesting side note on pink there. And I think pink is actually sort of starting to shake its feminine associations. Right now there's what's called millennial pink is like the hot color in the last year. And you'll see it everywhere. It's sort of this like muted rose quartz. Like if you think of Apple's, what is Apple's rose gold? It's very similar to that. So pink is really going everywhere. You see some big companies like T-Mobile and Lyft are really embracing pink. And it has the sort of associations that red does with being youthful, with being modern. And oddly, not oddly, but I think something that surprises people is pink is also very luxurious. So like purple, it's one of those things like if you're a luxury brand, pink is a really good thing to consider for you. Finally, or I guess not finally, in the color scheme, again, brown, which we talked about having all these negative associations, actually has really positive associations with being masculine and with being very serious. So it's oftentimes you'll see it used in like adventure companies who are running adventure trips will use brown. I think a great example is UPS uses brown because brown is very dependable, it's serious. So brown can be used very impactful. And then, as I said, culturally, you'll see it in a lot of vintage brands because brown has that sort of aged feel behind it. And then black. Black is, as yellow is very affordable, black is like the most luxurious. It's the most expensive color that you can use. It's very modern. It seems to have associations with being modern as well. White and gray are both sort of fairly neutral colors that are oftentimes you can very flexible. So I think that gets you through the whole rainbow. Hopefully that's not information overload for you right there.
That was perfect. Did I hear you say that black is the most expensive color?
I mean, that may have been hyperbole, but black certainly has associations with.
Oh, associations with, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's, so, one of the conversations we have going on Twitter is, should you choose a color that is your favorite to be a color for your business? I mean, sometimes that overlaps, right? Like my favorite color is red, red, red.
Yeah.
Right. But my logo color tends to lean a little bit more on orange, red, orange, or like something. So I'm like sort of close. Say more about how to choose a color maybe that you like that also reflects your business. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you want to feel like you like your logo and that sort of thing. So that is important. But I would say I would always make sure you can answer the question of why. Why do I want this color? And as I said, so starting with your brand personality is a great way. Another really good thing to do is to look at your competition and see what they have out there. This is going to be different in different industries. For example, as I mentioned, accounting is something like 65% of the logos in accounting are blue. In agriculture, you see like lots and lots of green logos. So understand retail, on the other hand, is very red, which makes sense because retail is one of the businesses that still have brick and mortar stores. And red is like, as we mentioned, grabs attention. So if you're walking down the street and there's a red sign, it draws more people in. So very much understanding what your competition is doing. And then I would say, then start to think about it. I'm trying to think as like an example of a business that you would want to go for. Let's say if you're opening like a hair salon, start to think about who's your clients. Are you catering towards women or men? What budget range are you going for? Are you going for people who are have a lot of extra money? Or are you really trying to get your foot in like a more economical range? Like, and then kind of go from there. So, my hairstylist clearly tries to attract people who have a different sensibility than some other people. So if you are willing to be a little bit more loud, pick that red for your logo if you wanted. So I would say favorite colors can help you. Favorite colors are not no-nos, but favorite colors should be, you should be asking yourself, do I want this because I like it, or do I want this because I think it's going to be good for my business?
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely excellent point. One of the things I started off this session talking about was this idea. We've just spent some time talking about what colors mean and what sort of emotions they trigger in us. But is it possible, I know that like in the real, like in our, as consumers or whatever, different colors can have you take on different actions, right? They say like paint your dining rooms red, I think, or something, because like that makes you want to eat or something like that. Can colors impact actions?
Yeah, and I think that that's a great example. So I think the ones, that is one of the most, the ones that I've heard in terms of action is really around that red and or yellow makes us hungry. So you'll see like oftentimes restaurants and food logos have that in there, whereas blue doesn't. Like blue like makes us unhungry. So I guess if you're on a diet, paint every room in your house blue. But yeah, so I think that those are some of them. I think in terms of like specific actions, that's the only one I've really heard of. The only other thing that I could do is like thinking about if they're drawing attention. So if you're designing a website and you're designing a CTA, a click-through button to get somebody to do something, you want the more visually that stands out, the better you're going to be. And I think that you can do that with just about any color in the right way. It's kind of pairing it with like, is it, the only black element on your website? That's going to be great today. Are you using contrast through black and white or different colors to point that? Is it, everything else is muted and then there's like a big red button? Like there's so many different ways that you can draw attention, and color is one of them. So I think that's like, you can kind of draw the eye in different ways with color, in terms of like making specifically somebody wants to do X, Y, or Z that might be out of its capability right now. But soon we'll figure out how to do that.
Yeah, so that makes a big impact, right? What is it that happens to your potential customers that they land on your website and everything is just completely mismatched? What is our response to like a clutter of color?
Yeah, and I would just say in general, I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but we have looked into this. Just like if you have basically an ugly website, whether that's through color or it's just not together, and I think particularly as time progresses and millennials and the generation after millennials are becoming more and more a part of the market, there is an expectation of a certain level of modernity in a website. And I think if you don't have that, and there are studies out there about if somebody lands on your website and they have a negative impression of it visually, they're X percentage more likely to bounce from your site and to go somewhere else and to just be like, I say this personally, and I'm on the old end of the millennial generation. But if I get somewhere and I can't figure out how to navigate something on your website in like 2 seconds, I'm gone. I'm like, somebody else can do this better. And I think that there's certain industries where this is particularly relevant. I think services industries are oftentimes one of those where you can really stand out. If you are, a therapist, if you are a dentist, having a website is one of those ways that, like, especially if you're trying to appeal to younger customers, just having a great website with easy navigation that details all of your information is going to be really strong for that. And color is certainly important there. So again, making sure you're telling that brand story and your brand personality through that color.
That's really great advice. Now I got to, let's kind of take that one step further. And let's say you're one of those small businesses and you're like, yes, I know that my color situation and my logo situation is a hot mess. And maybe you want to do a little bit of a rebrand. So is not liking stuff a good enough reason to rebrand? And how does a small business owner get this process started on a budget?
I think we all have instincts for a reason, and not liking is a great way to trust your gut and to start a project or something like that. Your next step is going to ask yourself, why don't I like it? What it is about this that I don't like? Is it because it makes, like, I have eight different colors on my website and it feels really hectic? And then think about it from the customer's perspective. They're going to land there. I don't know where to click. I don't know how to feel. I don't know what they're trying to tell me. So what it is about it? If you have like a stark black and white website and it's beautiful and you're like, but there's just something that doesn't feel right. Again, take that step back. You might have this stark, beautiful website, but you're a photographer who's shooting kids photos, portraits of kids. You want to so black and white is often used in photography, but for me, I want something a little bit more fun. I want something a little bit more engaging. So I'm going to go back and look at my color list and see that, pinks and reds are really kind of fun. How can I bring that into my branding? So I think not liking something, great way to start, and then understand why you don't like it. And once you have that why, then you can take that into your rebrand if that's what you want to, where you're saying, I know this is what I don't want. That helps me define who I am and what I want. And you give that information to your designer, whether you're working with a freelancer or whether you are working through a contest, and they'll be able to kind of help you translate that. I mean, that's what designers are great for. A great reason to use professional designers is that is their job, is to take these brand personalities and emotions and feelings and turn them into design.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's something that I've noticed, and maybe you can give some advice or kind of correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the things I've noticed is I actually have two types of designers that I engage with. And I have designers who are amazing at taking, let's say I know exactly what I want, Kelly. I know I want this. I want it to be a circle. I want this thing here. I just can't create it because I don't know how, right? So these are people who tend to be more, I would say, analytical in their behavioral style, and they take what you give them and they go with it. And then there are times where I only have feelings and these vague descriptions of things. And then I've noticed that there are designers that do extremely well when you give them very vague input. But working with those two types of designers is very different. So I've noticed, like, if the one that will do whatever I want, I tell her exactly what I want and she does it. And we can change it 500 different times and it works out. However, the designer that is like taking these nebulous ideas and creating something out of them, I find that it's best to say, I don't like that because of X, Y, and Z, but not to tweak it.
Right.
Does that make any sense to you? That's just a personal observation.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, anytime you're working with somebody, especially in a creative collaboration, like learning how to communicate is super, super important. And also learning the strengths and weaknesses of the people that you work with. Like, yeah, that makes total sense. From my days, either working as a filmmaker or in working with designers on our platform, which we do all the time here, understanding who I can tell exactly, I need you to go in and make this and do that. And then there's the people where I'm like, I want this to be kind of funny and silly. Like, here's the joke. Here's this, like, I like this sort of style, and just sort of letting them run wild. And those ones are really fun for me, because then you get something you totally weren't expecting back. And you're like, oh, this is even better than what I had in my mind. But then, yeah, it's really useful to know who your real practical people are when you're like, I really just need you to change this to blue, please. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great advice. Let's talk a little bit about something. One of the things that I always tell folks when I recommend 99 Designs is that you could have a logo inside of like a handful of days, right? I mean, I don't know, something like a week or something like that. But one of the things we've talked about today is that you do have to spend time thinking about what you want, why you want it that way, and so on and so forth. Can you maybe give us some guidelines for kind of what needs to be done before you start a contest? Because I got to tell you, I ran our contest at the most beautiful time on the planet, which is like right in the holiday season. And I came up against deadlines and contests were ending, and so, people weren't there, not my designers, but I mean like feedback people and so on and so forth. I would say to people, don't run your contest at Christmas. Probably not a good idea.
Yes, that can get tricky, and I've seen that as well. And I think it's especially, the holidays are probably a good time to avoid. The other thing that comes up oftentimes on our site is that our designers really are from all over the world. So it can be something like, it might not be a holiday here, but it is a holiday in Australia. And so sometimes that can come up. So you were asking just sort of generally what you needed to kind of have prepared. And I think that it's sort of a balance between, there are those people who are always going to want to have everything too prepared and that sometimes takes too long to get started. And then there's the people who kind of like, yes, I'm just going to do it. And they are not prepared enough. So I think it's somewhat comes down to your personality in terms of how you like to operate. But I think that as we were talking about, having a general idea of who you are as a company, what you stand for, and who your customers are is kind of what you want. Sometimes I think the logo design process can actually help you define that. So you don't have to be 100% there. I would say you want to have kind of an idea of what you're going for, and then go from there. And then I would also say, as we started out this conversation talking about the 99 Designs rebrand, as you grow, and hopefully if you're looking long-term, if you're looking in like after 5 to 10 years, you might have to do a reevaluation and do a rebrand. I mean, we look at all these huge multinational corporations do it. And even companies who seem to have this there's some that go all out, like the Airbnb rebrand, totally changed their logo, totally changed their color scheme, totally flipped everything. And then there's some that, for example, off the top of my head, Coca-Cola, we think of as having the same logo forever and ever. But the truth is they tweak it slightly regularly, or how they present that logo, like the, whether there's a slight gradient of the red behind it, or whether it's solid, like a very subtle tweak to the red. So there's all of these companies are constantly working to stay up to date. But I think in particular for companies that are really just starting out, anticipate that you're going to have an idea of who you are, and you're probably going to operate on that for the first, 1 to 5 years of your existence. But as your company grows, it like a child, it sort of becomes its own, it becomes its own thing, and it develops its personality that you as a parent are like, I have no idea where you learned to do this. And as you do that, you'll realize, okay, I need to rebrand because my business has become something else. So I also wouldn't feel like your first logo is your be all end all. Even if you have something you love, it might just be a slight tweak or an adjustment after 5 years to kind of grow with your business. So branding.
I've got a comment here from Stacy that is right on what you're talking about. And I got to say, I totally relate to her right here. So she's asking you the question, Is it okay to pick brand colors and use your name as a consultant as you discover your niche before developing a logo, rather than having to change this logo once you settle on a niche? Did you get that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's absolutely correct. Like there's some people who will do everything all at once and just want to get it done. And then there are some people who want to have that flexibility. And I think that what Stacy is saying is a really, really great way to go about it. Pick a color. And the other thing I think is, especially, what did she say, what kind of business she was in? I missed
it sounds like it's a consulting business.
Yeah. And things like consulting, or things where you are oftentimes like people don't even necessarily come up with a business name. They have the Stacy the business and Stacy the person. And we see that a lot of times in consulting industries, in service industries like photography or hairstylists or that sort of thing. Like your business is your name. You don't have a separate thing. And so people often do times just choose a color and then they'll choose a logo. And I think it's probably useful to mention that a logo doesn't have to be like necessarily a pictorial icon. You can think of things like the Target logo, which very clearly is, but then you think of things, for example, off the top of my head, like IBM is just 3 letters, or even Google is, the name Google is their logo. And they have a very specific color scheme that goes with it, but they tweak it. So just having a typographic or what we call a word mark logo is a totally valid thing to do. And if you want to start with just your name in a nice font that you've chosen from your computer, awesome. And then once you've kind of settled a little bit, work with a designer who's going to be able to like create custom typography to help you really like tweak that font into something really beautiful that represents you. That's great. And I think that's a really great sort of like beginning measure, because you're saying I'm picking some of this, I'm letting it develop, and then I'm going to grow from here. And I'm not going to like lock myself in, but I'm still going to be recognizable. People are still going to see my green Stacy logo and be able to identify it, even when I change it in the future.
I think that's such great advice, because that speaks to a big mistake that I made when I first started out. I was like, I'm going to have this logo. I like picked a name. I picked a logo before even knowing what I was about or what I was going to do. I threw all kinds of money at it. Now when I think back, I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Right. And with today's things, but you also mentioned something about icons. And I got to say that was something that was important to me when I did this particular logo design. And I noticed that even 99 Designs has an icon. I think having an icon rendering of your logo is important. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think that this has become increasingly important in our technological world these days, because we call them dynamic logos or flexible logos. And thinking about, as you're developing it, or it doesn't have to be done all up front, thinking about the different places that you're going to put it. Like if you're going to have like a piece of marketing collateral, do you want like a tiny little square that you can stick on a bottom? Like how is this going to look on a website header? Like you may have this beautiful like vintage emblem that looks like it's, with your name around like an illustration, which may look great when it's on your sign front, but when it's on your website, it just takes up too much real estate. So having kind of different versions or different implementations of your website or of your logo is really important, I think, these days. Like for ours is very simple. We have a word mark, which is all 99 Designs spelled out, or we have just like a 99D inside of a little square that we can throw on things. One of my jobs is creating our email newsletter, and we're doing an Olympic themed newsletter this week. And so we had this art created on our site. And so we were able to put like the 99D on the bottom of the little artist illustrated snowboarder. And so it's a 99 Designs branded snowboard, but we had that flexibility to do it because we had those assets just kind of ready to go.
That's perfect. Thank you. So now let's kind of ratchet it back and let's talk about some practical things, right? We talked about some of the things you need to have in line before you start your contest, because believe me, people, when I tell you the contest goes fast and it's overwhelming, and before you know it, you have to make choices. So one of the really awesome tips I got from my project manager, which I would not have gotten if I didn't get the platinum things, I'm really, really advocating, because I would have been the first one to not choose that. But I'm telling you, it's a good value. So one of the things my project manager told me was really, really smart is when you're starting a contest for rebranding, don't think about your entire project and all the things you want, because Kelly, there were like 5 different things I wanted,
yep.
Right? And that was like very overwhelming. He's like, pick the logo design contest first, go through that process, and then choose a 1-to-1 project. Maybe you can kind of give folks a little bit of an idea about how that works and how they might approach if they do have a rebrand that they want to do.
Yeah, so I think that was really great advice that you got. Is yes, find that it's finding that sort of cornerstone of your brand. And I think that you can do that. A logo is a great way to find that cornerstone, and even if it's just that one version of it. So just a little bit kind of a how the 99 Designs contest work is you fill out a brief, we'll ask you all these questions, we'll show you a bunch of awesome pictures, you get to pick your favorites, and we'll sort of help you figure out what your style preferences are, what your color preferences are. And then it goes, this brief gets posted live to a bunch of designers. Anybody who's interested, and like you said, you mentioned you did a platinum contest, which is only, we have three tiers of designers. And so our top level designers can enter platinum contests. Our top and mid level can enter gold, and then silver and bronze are open to everybody. So, you know, it's just going to, depending on which one you go, you might get more or less design options. And it can seem really exciting at first to get a lot of design options, but sometimes getting fewer is better, because when you realize, oh my God, there's 80 of these and I have to provide feedback, it can get a little bit overwhelming. But anyway, there's this open period, and then you have a finalist period. So I would say in that open period, your idea is really to get, just to get ideas and really kind of try to learn who these designers are. You pick the 6 or fewer to go into the final round. And that's when you can start thinking, like we were talking about having different versions of your logos. When you have those 6 finalists, you can be like, hey, I need these 2 different versions. Can you show me how you would take that and do that? But yeah, as I was saying, you're focusing on getting that logo, that cornerstone. And once you're done with that, as you mentioned, now you have at least one, if not like more than one, really great designers that you've developed a relationship with. So even if you didn't pick George's design as your final logo, you can be like, I know George does really beautiful vintage design, and now I can work with him because I really want to do this beautiful vintage poster or something for an event that I'm throwing. So having first of all, you'll meet a lot of great designers, but yeah, I think start with one, and then you have that'll help your imagination grow. I mean, as I mentioned, I've done a lot of creative stuff. My favorite way to work creatively is to like learn people, and as they throw you ideas, you throw them, and you sort of build off of each other. So starting with one project is a great way to do it. I feel like there was another part to that question that I may have missed.
No, I think that's really good. I got to ask you a question, sort of about, I guess. Oh no, I got to tell everybody that we have an awesome offer from 99 Designs, because it just came through on the Twitter chat. I don't know. Do you know what that is, and do you want to share it, or do you want me to share it?
I think you should share it. I don't know if people have filled me in on the details of what it is.
Okay. Well, it says, once you're ready to brand, we're giving a free $99 logo design upgrade this week to all hashtag Bizapalooza chat people. And there's a special link on there. Please go follow it, everyone. Is there anything, Kelly, that we did not talk about that's important to talk about?
Oh, no, but I have an interesting color anecdote while we're on this. Just one of my favorite stories, because people never believe me when I tell them, is that there are people, or they don't think blue was a color that people could see until very modern times. As strange as that sounds, that we talk about how impacted we are by color. Until people started defining things as blue, we couldn't see it. There's still a tribe in Namibia where scientists went, and they don't have a separate word for blue. They say blue and green the same. They did this experiment where they showed them like 10 different blue or green squares and one blue square in it, and they could not pick out the blue square. But they have so many different shades of green, and you show those different shades of green to a Western person, and they're like, which one is different? And you can't figure it out. And like over there, everybody's like, boop, that one. So I just think color is super fascinating, and we think of it as a scientific thing about how light comes into our corneas and et cetera, but it's really like has all of these cultural implications as well.
I think that's astounding. And I could talk to you forever. I have so much more to say, but what I would tell everybody is to head on over to DIY Marketers. There are about 2 or 3 articles up there right now today talking about color, talking about the rebrand, all the different things you should be thinking about as you rebrand. So it's DIYmarketers.com. If you want to see our replays of Bizapalooza Chat, it's DIYmarketers.com/Bizapalooza, new location, new brand. All thanks to our dear friends over at 99 Designs who rock it every single day. Happy birthday, 99 Designs.
I will pass that on.
Well, there you guys have it. Another super informative Bizapalooza Chat where we're talking about the psychology of color with our sponsor, 99 Designs. Stay on the chat, Twitter, #Bizapalooza Chat. Lots of conversation going on there. Until next week, we will see you right back here, Bizapalooza Chat, Mondays, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. See you then.
Bye. Thanks, Ivana.